Well. Welcome to another episode of Gripped. On this show, we experience radical transparency. Our guest dives into the dark past of substance abuse, being surrounded by crime, and the decisions that ultimately led him to be able to catapult himself out of that circumstance. He is the perfect example of how being gripped can take you from seeing your circumstances as the future that you've been given and there's nothing you could do about it, and you're pigeonholed to that as a future, versus deciding that instead I'm not going to live that way. I'm going to become the lessons that I've gleaned from my past and use that for new horizons. I was extremely inspired by his story and how it's going to be relevant for the listeners to help you get out of your comfort zone, seek fear, and use your support network to help you overcome that fear. Today, as a result of all of his past, instead of continuing to live that, he is now the founder of a company, Weird Is NRML, where they train organizations like um, tech startups, banks, Fortune 500 companies, how to work collaboratively, listen openly, and empower each other to do good work. I couldn't be more excited for you to listen into this episode. Please help me welcome Michaud Garneau.
Shit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
some real shit. I'm sure you've seen some shit.
I've seen a couple of shits, yes.
Yeah, we've seen some shits, and I'm excited to talk about some of that shits. If you're ready to go,
Yeah.
cool. The way that the show starts is the camera's on whoever is speaking at the time. So right now the camera's on me. If you say something, it'll come to you, which is fine. We can do that before we start, but I'll just make sure it's on me. I'll say some random stuff, and then I'll say, "This is Gripped. Michaud, welcome to the show," and then we're on.
And then you want me to say something?
And then the show started.
And then we go back and forth as we
And
please.
so I'd prefer if you responded. That would be the best way to start. Is with a response.
It's like
So the camera is now on me, and please respond when it is time to respond. All right. Okay, here we go. This is Gripped. Michaud, welcome to the show.
thanks for having me. Super stoked to be here.
Yeah, very excited. And the first time we met, for those that are hearing about you for the first time, you came into our company, Fix Software, and you facilitated an experience that I couldn't forget. And so I wanted to have you come on the show, talk a little bit about the work you do and how that's inspired me to live a better life and how our listeners can actually live a better life as well.
Cool. Thanks. I'm really excited.
Yeah, I'm going to read off something from your website to help prompt the beginning of this conversation. This is what you wrote. You wrote, "We believe that at the core of empathy, collaboration, creativity, and communication is a willingness to be uncomfortable. We believe a willingness to be uncomfortable is not some innate bravery, rather a skill that can be developed through exposure. We provide that exposure in a safe and supportive environment that builds teams equipped to handle the challenges of the future." And I think that's a very inspiring statement. And I did feel a little bit uncomfortable when we did the workshop. And I pride myself on being someone that's getting out of my comfort zone all the time. I did want to read one other quote to see if that connects and kind of where you were inspired by this idea and to create these workshops. One of my favorite authors, Tim Ferriss, he wrote that a person's success in life can usually be measured by the number of uncomfortable conversations he or she is willing to have. So I'm wondering, can you tell me a little bit about where did this philosophy of getting out of your comfort zone come from and how it's impacted you and the people you teach?
Yeah, totally. Um the So growing up, I've always done different things. Like I think I have a rich history of trying new things, and of getting into kind of strange situations. And my best friend growing up and I used to always say, everything is weird until it becomes normal.
Mm.
And we just find ourselves in these situations and be like, what is going on? And then like 3 months later, we'd be like, oh yeah, this is this normal. We know that that was happening. And then throughout my life, as I was getting older and learning new and different skills, and really sort of like I got really into the idea of personal development when I was, I don't know, like 15 or 16. I was around a lot of I had like a misspent youth, have you? And struggled with a lot of like drug addiction and stuff like that. And one of the ways to get out was finding different interests. And the first kind of way out was I got really into yoga. I got into like just doing tons and tons of yoga when I was, 16, 17. I have like a gigantic Om symbol on my body from it because it was so important to me.
Cool.
And that helped me break out of this. And at first it was super weird. And then it was like, oh yeah, like sitting around a circle with a bunch of people and like chanting, this is just like super normal. And then throughout the course of my life, there was like a whole bunch of different instances like this that kind of got increasingly more weird. But I felt more comfortable and could like feel the expansiveness of it and feel myself like looking back to how I was, even now looking back to how it was 2 years ago, I'm like, oh, holy shit, so much has changed. Mm-hmm. But all of the things that have changed from, that time I was 16 until now have been a direct result of feeling resistance or like discomfort to something and then taking a step into that and like leaning into it and then being able to move through it. And I wanted to be able to share that with other people, which hopefully I'm doing now to an extent.
Yeah, and you definitely are. And where I want to take this is immediately to value for those that are listening is you've had a lot of experience helping people to take that first step. We all experience discomfort. Some of us are stepping outside of it. Some of us aren't. What's the difference between the people that you see that are stepping outside of their comfort zone? They're experiencing growth and expansiveness as you described as a result of that. And for those of us that continue to have doubt, continue to stay inside of our box, our shell, and aren't realizing our true potential.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think like the two key things, I mean, something that's super important is support. Like, the two main things are support and fear. So like, I guess everything is underwritten by this idea of fear. If you do something new, there could be change. That change could affect you negatively. There's fear around that. People might not like you. You might not be accepted. And those are like really real things like that could actually happen. You could step out of your comfort zone and the people around you might not support you anymore. So I think like as crucial to addressing this idea of fear and how you can sort of move through it is also acknowledging the idea of support. Like if you have a group of people that support you, your family or an intentional family, a community that you're a part of, then it becomes so much easier to make those steps in a positive direction. I see the like major thing that I see versus people like with people who are making big changes and people who are not, everybody's scared. Everyone's fucking terrified of everything. Like I'm scared often when I'm doing things, and I do things that people would consider scary all the time. That fear doesn't like go away. So everybody is sort of like dealing with acting in the face of fear, but in my opinion, the real catalyst for action, is having a supportive network of people that have your back and that are looking out for what's best in you and want you to sort of take a chance and grow.
Can you give me an example of a time in your life where you felt like you were taking a step out of your comfort zone? You knew that it was scary, and I totally agree. I'm fucking terrified all the time, especially of what people are going to think of the actions that I'm taking. I try to take them regardless and hope that, like you're saying, the people that really get me and the people that really know what my true intentions are and I've communicated those intentions with are going to be the ones that are going to support me. Can you describe maybe a situation or experience you've had where you were stepping out of your comfort zone and you did have someone that was there supporting you, and as a result of that you were able to continue to step out of your comfort zone? I'm not sure if you experienced that when you were starting your business, Weird Is NRML, or any other areas of your life.
Yeah, I mean, like almost always. Like we could pick almost like a month, and I could kind of give you an example of something like that. Well, I think so. For example, with my business, what's happened now is that the groundwork has been laid through so many smaller actions that doing something like branching off and starting my own business that is really just based around like my own philosophy, research that I've done, and experiences that I've had. Like, it's a deeply personal business,
Mm-hmm.
which is horrifying. Like, starting a business is scary. Starting a business that is just like based on you, like on the face of it, anything that we do is like me presenting my thoughts to the public. Um, and like, I'm supported in so many different ways, but the I think the thing that really allowed me to do it is I now have been supported by people for almost a decade in doing different actions. I would say that, so starting my business was super scary. The thing that was the scariest period of time for me was probably like, oh, what was it now? I don't know, 3 years ago or so. We'll say like 3 to 5 years ago, I really started like challenging gender norms and the way that I presented. Um, so right now, I have a beard. I very much present as a man. Um, but kind of ever since I was a kid, I've had like more feminine traits, or like typically like these are for girls. Like, I like dancing, talking
Mm-hmm.
about whatever, and I would get like all through high school and into adulthood would get like gay bashed and stuff like that. Had people really making fun of how I would dress, whatever. And I just kind of pushed it down and bottled it up, thought about it a bit, but things kept boiling up, and I just needed to have the experience of presenting in a way that was not so masculine. And I started dressing like slightly differently. Like, first thing, I got my ears pierced, and then sort of like increasingly, I would, only have a shaved face, like straight down to my skin, and then started wearing makeup, dressing more feminine, and then just like fully presenting in a feminine and non gender conforming sort of way. And that was fucking terrifying. And the support, I had so much support from my roommate at the time, who's this like incredible man. And then my whole community of friends were so supportive. I was working at my friend's cafe at the time, which was like a very queer space, and there was so much support there. And even though like I had all of that support, and I knew I had all that support to like, and I had gone out in drag and stuff, like in like get drunk, go out at night, whatever, you're in drag, sort of like protected, right? Like it's
Mm.
kind of acceptable. But the act of waking up in the morning and like putting on makeup and earrings and heels and heading out like to walk down Bloor Street and go to work was so fucking scary. Like so scary. Um, and I could do it because I felt safe doing it because I knew that I had the support primarily of like Elliot and then of my greater community around me.
I really appreciate the vulnerability in you sharing. I'd love to dive a little bit deeper into this because the theme of the podcast is about people who are gripped and engaged in the work that they're doing and that impact that it has on their mental health and having a purpose, having a direction, what that means for their lives and how they show up. And so at this time when what you're describing, was that like late high school or was that after you graduated already?
No, this time when I was presenting feminine,
Yes.
that was like
Years later?
4 years ago. Yeah,
Oh, okay, got it.
yeah.
Okay,
So
got it.
that's like well into my adulthood, that I was fully presenting that way.
Okay. I do want to take a step even further back, and then we can kind of see how you progress to that point. You had mentioned some, very briefly a little bit about your childhood, some of the experiences you had when you were early in high school. And I do want to touch on that because, again, the theme of the show is about mental health. And I want to read a quote by Jim Rohn. He's one of my favorite authors and personal development speakers. My roommate and I listen to him all the time. And one of the quotes that I have up on my wall in my room is that success is as simple as a few simple disciplines practiced every single day. And he also says that failure is the opposite, which is a few simple errors in judgment practice every single day. So you mentioned being in high school and experiencing some challenging times. In fact, you wrote that you were only able to get out, and this is great. The connection earlier, you were only able to get out because of the support of your family, and that really made you think a lot about the privilege that you've had, and you were only a couple bad decisions away from ruin. So I'm wondering if you could, for those that are listening here, can you tell us a little bit about the challenges you experienced, only so that we can come from a place of what maybe you could have done differently, or even what was the catalyst for you to get out of that area of your life?
Sure. Yeah. So, um, in high school, like starting in grade 9 or so, um, I guess I've always felt like a little bit of an outcast. Like wasn't quite sure where I belonged. And I've also never liked authority,
Hmm.
which are perhaps important pieces. Um, but in high school, I got really into doing drugs, like got connected with community. Community.
It is a community. Yep. That isn't inaccurate.
Yeah. um, so yeah, when I was in high school, I started like smoking weed in grade 9 and hanging out with all the druggy kids who were like the cool kids, and for me, that felt really great to be one of the cool kids. And as I kept doing that, I had some other influences outside of school who would introduce me to other drugs. I was selling weed, and then got introduced to cocaine in like grade 9 as well, and then started selling that, and kind of all through high school, I was selling and using drugs super heavily. Um, the cocaine got to the point where like I would be doing it in the bathroom at like 7 a.m. at my house before leaving to catch the bus to school. Be like leaving in the middle of class to go and do it at lunch, and I was doing it by myself. Like, my other friends, at least for the first couple of years, didn't know that I was doing it. And these were other kids. These were other kids who were also like drug dealers.
Hmm.
Um, um,
They were part of that community.
yeah, they were part of the community. Yeah. And eventually, other people caught up, and then we were all doing it, and there would be times where I'd be like sitting in somebody's basement. Their parents are home. We're like 16. Sitting in somebody's basement with like four dudes wearing a Nietzsche tracksuits. Like, watching Belly. Do you know that? And like blasting these huge lines of coke and making sure that nobody would talk at all. Like we got like so paranoid, but would just keep doing so much coke. And I was like, why the fuck are we doing? Like, what are we doing? What's even the point here? So anyway, like that kind of digressed and got like, after you do it for a while, you end up in a pretty bad state. So I was really like down on myself. I gained a ton of weight, which is kind of weird to do on coke, but I was like close to 200 pounds. Sad. And then as like high school ended, all of my friends who were like the cool kids started, going to jail, going to rehab. It'd be like fights where people have guns. People would show up at parties. Someone showed up at a fucking party with a chainsaw. And just like this really rapid decline. And people were dying. People were dying in like car accidents. Also within that time, my best friend growing up started using crack, and I saw him in his state just like disintegrate at like a rapid pace. So that's a whole other story too. Yeah, I grew up in a small town that was predominantly white. He was the only black kid in town. He was subject to racism, blatant racism constantly, both through like our peers and then also systemically. He and I did the same things. We both sold drugs. We both smoked weed. We did everything. But
Yeah.
he had a criminal record miles long, and I didn't have one. And it's not because we both weren't breaking the law. We would get pulled over, and they'd go to his side of the car and search him and not search me. And so he was like destined for failure. And I guess going back to the support, like I had support built into the system. Like I'm a straightish white man. Like I had support even from people who didn't know that they were supporting me, and he did not. He had the opposite. People were trying to send him to jail to get him into trouble. So yeah, he like digressed really quickly into using crack really regularly, and then a lot of other people that I was around started doing that as well. And at the same time, I would still be going out until like 7 a.m. I'd be like walking home as my dad would be leaving for work. And they just, I don't know, kind of pretended like they didn't know what was happening for a bit. But yeah, like, I don't, kind of eventually things came to a head. Like everything was digressing so quickly with my friends, and one morning I got home super late, ran past my dad, not like ran, but ran into him. And then the following morning, my parents had left me a note that said something to the extent of like, Michaud, we just want you to know that we love you and we think something's not okay with you right now. And if you want to talk about it, we're here. And for me, just seeing that was enough to for me to be like, okay, now is when I'm going to change. Now is when I can change, because just like seeing that unconditional love and support from these people being like, hey, something's not okay, we want to support you, just like shook me out of everything. And then from there I was able to make a lot of headway actually, and kind of move on from there.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, it sounds like they opened a door for you to be able to step through, and they were
Yeah,
just by being there.
that's it. Like
They weren't trying to solve the problem.
that's it. They were not trying to solve the problem. They were not. They were like, here's what, we think something's not okay. We love you. If you want to, we can talk about it. And we never even talked about it. I wasn't comfortable to talk about it.
But it was enough to help you make the decision.
Yeah, I don't even know if I told them that I read the note, like, but yeah, it was enough. It was like, it was enough. I think if you, like, the fucked up thing, if you use drugs or if you do anything that's sort of like counter culture, or not counterculture, but like that's not widely accepted, is that after you've done it, society kind of writes you off. Like if you've gone to jail, society is like, oh no, you've gone to jail. And then it's so much harder to reintegrate.
Yeah.
And so, like, the experience that I was having was that in this small town, everybody knew that I was like a really heavy drug user, drug dealer, whatever. And then I was like, how am I ever going to get out of this? And then just having that support from my parents made me able to sort of see that other people could support and see it in that way as well.
Yeah. Thank you for the, again, I appreciate it. I've mentioned it before, but thanks for the vulnerability. Like we're getting into topics that could be considered, risque right now. And while they can be, there's a lot of people that are going through these exact same circumstances. And the purpose of having this conversation is that there's light at the end of the tunnel. You can take a step through that door, whether someone's there to support you or not, because the reality is that there's always someone there to support you. Even if you want to reach out to Michaud or I, we're there to support you. And ultimately, we're not defined by our past. We're the resources and lessons that we've been able to glean from our pasts. So I'm sure you'd agree that you wouldn't be half the person you are today if you didn't go through those experiences. Because now, as you go and do your training, it's part of who you are. It's part of the benefit and the value that you can bring. So I appreciate you sharing the stories. One of the things that I wanted to ask you is if you could go back and kind of give that young lad some advice, if you were to have an opportunity to do that kind of DeLorean style roll up and like open up the door and say, hey, dude, what's up? And then give him some advice. Do you have anything that you'd share?
Yeah, I think like I was really scared then. Yeah, I was really scared as a teenager. And I thought I would never ever have somewhere that I would fit in. And I think I would let that person know that there are going to be places that feel like home, that you're going to be able to find a group of people around whom you can be wholly yourself, because that whole time, even up until a few years ago, I would hide bits of myself so that it would fit in,
Hmm.
and then never feel comfortable. You need to look, but you don't need to do that, because for every person, there's a group of people who you can be yourself around.
Yeah, one of my friends, he's building a large brand called Archangel, and he's building it around the idea of like the troublemakers, the rebels, the people that didn't fit in. There's a lot of people that feel that way. I know I have friends in the gay and queer community who feel that way. And so I'm wondering if you were to speak to those individuals. You mentioned your past and that experience a few years ago at this point, where you were really taking steps to be yourself and to portray yourself how you were actually feeling rather than hiding. What would you be able to share? Is there anything on top of having a great support network that you'd be able to share for those people that was beneficial for you at that time?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I think is important to share is make sure that you're physically safe. Like, for people in certain communities, there's a real risk of physical harm, um, if you be your like true self.
Mhm.
And I just want people to ensure that they're safe. Um, and I mean, like, for me, the biggest thing was going to a city center, like going to a metropolis. Like, if you live in a small town and you feel isolated, at least now there's the internet. So find like a group of people online, please. They exist. If you feel like you don't belong somewhere, type in some things that you believe, and you will find a group of people. And then beyond that, try to get to a more populated area, because the chance of meeting people who are more like you is higher. I mean, yeah, it's doing it in small places is really difficult, and so don't. I know, there's a lot of like inspirational quotes out there that tell you to just like do whatever. You can be anyone you want. I think it's important to acknowledge that sometimes there's real risk, and to to actually be aware of that.
Okay. And from kind of this position of, you know, being yourself, finding communities that are both help you feel that belonging, that sense of belonging, but also, or maybe a little bit more positive, some of the other communities that you had been part of in the past. The one thing that I'm really aware of is that you could have easily gone down the same path as a lot of your friends did, where you ended up in jail, or your circumstances continued to deteriorate, but it didn't. And so we had that decision where your parents left that note. From that position, from that place, where did you go? Because again, the point of this podcast is gripped. So you must have been gripped by something. You must have decided that you wanted to take a different path. And kind of what did that look like? And for those of us that are thinking about, maybe we want to take a new path, we want to dig a little bit deeper into the path that we're already going down to increase the engagement we're experiencing, increase the passion, increase our energy. What was that for you, and how can we start to do that in our lives?
Yeah, totally. So for me, the thing that that gripped me then was doing yoga.
Hmm.
It was this like switch where I'm still like the the thing to me that brought a lot of value about yoga was it had a spiritual component, which was very important, extremely important for me at the time, to have something to believe in and that I could connect to. There's a physical component which makes you feel good, um, and then there was like a sort of broader community that I could tie into. Um, so and I just became obsessed with it.
Hmm.
Like, I think the same thing that's in me that got me kind of like obsessed with drugs was the same thing that got me into yoga. Like I've heard some stuff that talks about like an addict is an addict. It doesn't matter what they're going after.
Mm-hmm.
And so like I don't know if I just replaced an unhealthy addiction with a healthy addiction. And then for me throughout my life I've you know, when I did yoga for a few years, and then I kind of lost interest in it, like got to a point that I considered really good. And then I got really interested in theater and art and like immersive art. And then it was like balls to the wall in that, just like dove into it, did it as much as I possibly could, did like some performances at the Art Gallery of Ontario, traveled all around North America doing different shows and stuff. And I was like, okay, cool, nailed that. And then I wanted to be a triathlete. So I was like, fuck it, I'm gonna obsess over this. So like taught myself how to swim, was like
very cool.
Didn't know how to swim, then started going to the pool 5 days a week, like crushing it out, ended up like placing extremely well a year later, doing a triathlon, and then now it's like the business stuff where I'm like, yo, fuck yeah, I want to take all of this stuff, like the through line with all of that is like, yeah, like learning new things helps you feel better. Like if I think of my base state now and my base state before, it's like I used to be really self-destructive and sad. And then now my base state is like, if I get to that point, it'll be like, maybe I'll go eat some ice cream or like have a triple cheeseburger. Like, it's not like, hey, I'm gonna go smoke crack until 7 a.m. It's like, I'll supersize it. Yeah, okay, let's do this. And I think, like, to answer your question of like, how can that help other people? I think if you, I just think it all goes back to fear. Like, everybody has things, you have to have something that you're interested in. There has to be like a glint of something that you find interesting, and it might be, this is for people at like a far end of the spectrum. You might not think that you have any interests. And I think that you probably do. They're just like under a million layers of fear and rules that tell you that you're not allowed to do things for yourself. So to get to the point where you can sort of have this thing that grabs you and lets you to go take your own path. Taking your own path is an act of freedom. Like you're driving your own path, and you can't do that if you're bogged down by fear. And being bogged down by fear is a real thing. It's not the individual's fault. But in order to find that thing and to start moving through it, you need to break away these layers of fear that you have that prevent you from having your own actual experience of the world instead of having an experience that other people tell you to have. And so my advice would be to really, really try to draw your attention inside and notice when you're out in just like your regular day, if there's something that makes you feel like sort of uncomfortable, or you notice yourself acting a certain way, to challenge yourself to act in a different way. Like if you notice, say you're in line, you have the inclination to ask the person in front of you a question and you don't because fear. You're like, oh shit, I wanted to ask that person something, I didn't because I'm fearful. Take a big breath in, exhale, and then ask the person the thing, assuming it's nothing like detrimental to the other person. And continue to do that. Continue to take those, what seems like a tiny little step, to break down whatever it is that's holding you back. And you do that for long enough, you're going to open yourself up. You're going to find out what actually interests you, and you're going to start redefining how you approach your own life and be able to then actually be gripped by something and make your own choices. But you need to start really small.
That was extremely insightful. I really appreciate that. I want to, before the last question, I want to ask you a little bit about listening, because I'm constantly thinking about whether or not I'm actually listening to somebody or not. Not necessarily on this show. You know, it was very easy to listen to you because you speak very eloquently, and I think you're a great conversationalist. But I have had people in the past where I thought I was a great listener, and it was even like just like 3 weeks ago. I was in Montreal with a friend. I spent all morning with them. We were having great conversation all day long, and then at one point, she turned to me and she said, like, you just don't listen. And I thought about it because I had thought I was this great listener, and I said, can you tell me a little bit more about that? And she just said, like, yeah, you're just waiting for the next time that you can open your mouth and start talking rather than actually hearing what I'm saying. And so I know a big part of your Weird Is Normal workshops has to do with listening. So before we ask the last question, I was hoping you could share a little bit about listening, how we can improve it, why it's so important. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, totally. So first of all, that's really great that that person called you out. Like, I bet you're going to do, like, think about it a lot, and then based on what I know about you, you're gonna try to get better at it, right? Like, as much as it sucks to be told that you're wrong at something, it's actually like a real learning opportunity. And so even just that got this question, and then maybe this will give you some tips, um, so one of the things that can happen, so basically what happened there was that she didn't feel heard. That it doesn't mean that you're a good or a bad listener. It has nothing to do really with you. It's her experience of the situation, which was that she didn't feel heard. So then your job, more so than being a good listener, is being good at conveying to people that you've heard what they said. Does that distinction make sense?
Yeah, that does. Okay.
Um,
Just to
so
clarify, just to clarify, instead of me actually needing to be a good listener, even though that's the goal, being a good listener would mean that I'm communicating to them that I'm hearing them.
yes, yes, being a good listener would be you communicating to them that you have heard and understood what they're saying.
Okay.
So one of the, like, an exercise that I get people to do is to repeat back to some, and this is like a classic active listening exercise, but you repeat back to the person what what you heard, but more like what you understood. So somebody says something and they're like, and then you repeat back to them, okay, so this is what I'm hearing. And then that sort of lets people know that you're listening well, if they're like, yes, that's what I said. And then if immediately on top of that you add your own take, this person isn't going to feel heard. I feel like that might have been the situation where it's like they say something, you're listening well, and then you say something on it thinking that you're building and creating a conversation, and then this person just feels like you want to put forth your idea instead of like acknowledging theirs, perhaps. Um, so a good way of like moving through that is like what you said when they told you that you weren't a good listener. You said, tell me more. So that's something that you can say after somebody says something to you. They say something and then you're like, this is what I'm understanding, tell me more. Or tell me more about that. Or just like, you're like nodding your head and being like, oh, okay, I hear you. To me, the thing that seems to happen the most with this, with like, specifically with people feeling like they're not heard, is when there's the part of the conversation that comes after whatever they say goes in a direction that they weren't intending to go with what they said.
Okay.
even if it's attached.
I've definitely had that experience. I remember another time where a friend was in the city and we were going for like a long walk along the lake shore, and a few times they had said something to me where it reminded me of, like, as an example, like a book that I had read. And so like I would like take the quote that I heard and be like, this is what he said, and then I was trying to take it somewhere else because of that, instead of going with their conversation, because I thought, I'm so insightful, I've got this great idea from this book that I read, like let me share that, maybe it'll add value to their life, instead of letting the conversation go naturally. It's challenging because like I have to like bookmark that and tell myself that it's not really needed right now. Maybe if they're open to the suggestion later, I can bring it up, but right now I should hear them out.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard.
Yeah, so even noticing within yourself, you're like, oh, did I switch to this being about me?
Mm.
Is it good? Be like, am I interested in where they are, or do I think I have something interesting to add? And
Got it.
there's different times for both of those. Um, but the more you can facilitate somebody else feeling heard, the the better the relationships you can build, in my experience.
Yeah. It sounds
Also,
like, go ahead.
also in my experience, you often end up talking a lot less. Like, I have some relationships where I just kind of like listen to the person, or like where we'll have turns, like one time we'll hang out and it's them talking and me
Cool.
listening, and switches, and other people where it's like all just going at the same time. It's very different. So it's like an individual approach. But yeah, erring on the side of listening is,
Yeah, I like that. It's erring on the side of being interested versus trying to be interesting. But there is a balance, like you're saying, because I've been on dates before where, like, at the end of the date, the person will say to me, like, I don't know anything about you, because all I did was ask questions the whole time and ask them to elaborate on them, and then ask them another question based off that. And then I'm just like, I'm
mhm,
like, I'm genuinely interested in the person, and then they come out feeling like they don't know me.
right. And then you get a second date.
Foot in the door.
Yeah, right.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, first try to be understanding, then before you're trying to be understood, and it's the same principle for listening.
Yeah.
Cool.
And the same idea with like business. You want to give people something first before you're asking for something.
Yeah. Okay. Well, hey, I really appreciate you jumping on the show today. This has been super fun, and I really appreciate the candor in your communication. I think it's gonna be valuable for a lot of people, especially those people that um, are thinking about making a direction in their life, or they feel like their circumstances. I've had some conversations recently with people in my life where they feel like their circumstances is really gonna be a big factor and dictate the next steps for them. And I said, it's an indication of where you're starting, not an indication of where you're going. And so I really appreciate that candor. I do want to finish off with my favorite question, which is, you can share absolutely anything from your heart, whatever's speaking to your soul right now. If it's a book recommendation, a quote you love, anything from the work you do at Weird Is Normal. I know I get to control and shape the conversation, so this one's totally yours. You can do whatever with it, whatever you like.
Cool. I feel like there's somebody telling me that I should just really, really pitch my business.
Which you can. Which you can,
Yeah,
totally.
my business is called Weird Is Normal. I do communication training for organizations. Find me on LinkedIn. But what I want to talk about is just like, so I'm in a relationship right now, and my partner has some mental health challenges that they're facing. Um, and it's been really fucking interesting for me. I didn't know. So, yeah, I'm just going to stumble through this because it's not fully formed as like a statement. I didn't know that they're that they were struggling with their mental health as much as they were.
Hmm.
I did see a series of behaviors that I identified as, I'm going to say, lazy, um, and I cast like a negative judgment on it.
Okay.
And I was like, I don't know if I can keep doing this because of this is how you act, X, Y, and Z. And that kind of went on for like a while where I was like, I don't know if I can do this. Like, I don't understand. You're not motivated. You're not doing anything. Like, pick yourself up by the bootstraps and go for it. Like, what's going on here? And then kind of simultaneously, we had a bit of, I mean, we had a fight, and it was mentioned that it was that they had gone through a lot of trauma and that their behaviors were being informed by trauma. Well, at the same, like the day before or something, I had met up with a friend of mine whose mother has gone through a lot of trauma in her life. And we were both kind of talking about the behaviors of me talking about my partner, her talking about her mom, and that they were like extremely similar, like almost to a T. Like they acted almost in the exact same way that drove us both insane.
Okay.
And then after talking to her and hearing the trauma thing, I was like, huh, turns out this thing that's really upsetting me isn't my partner at all. It's trauma being manifest inside of them. They and so immediately my mind shifted from negative judgments like you can't be this way to like how can I support you, how can I seek to like now I want to understand you more, now I want to support you, now I want to help you move forward. And our relationship has fundamentally changed on that. I have such a deeper understanding, we're both like in such a better place, and that all came from understanding more. And I guess the big takeaway that I would say is like that could have been avoided if I had communicated better and been like, hey, I'm noticing these behaviors. Can we talk about it a little bit? Or do you feel this way? Or hey, this is what I'm seeing. Do you see that too?
Or a quick
Um,
post-it note.
what's that?
Or a quick post-it note.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and just let the person know that you care about them. So yeah, that's kind of the thing. Like if you have people in your life that you love and you notice them acting in ways that don't seem super healthy, have a conversation with them and just let them know that you care about them and you want what's best for them. Seek to understand before judging.
Perfect way to end the show. Really appreciate that. I've got a lot of people in my community that are part of the mental health space, and our big philosophy right now and the mandate that we're sharing and advocating for is to be there. Be there for your peers. I could hear a lot of that in your story today about support and the impact that that's had on you. And so huge shout out for you coming on here with your candor. You're very thoughtful. I can tell you genuinely care about people, and I really appreciate you being you and showing up as you because you're making a difference. You made a difference here at Fix. You made a difference in my life, and I think you're going to make a difference in the listeners' lives as well. So, Michaud, thanks for being on the show.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. It's been great.
Okay, take care.
Okay, see ya.